Activity 1, planning a meal. The focus of this activity is learning the reading and spelling around food preparation. The benefits to the student: writing, shopping lists, notes, menus, instructions; reading, labels, signs, lists, recipes, and instructions. The assessment activity will include following a recipe, following a safe food preparation guide, writing an invitation, reading a receipt, writing a menu, writing the steps to cooking rice, and writing a shopping list. That's the assessment activities. Coursework. Coursework is different from the assessment work. Coursework is the work that you would normally do in the class. General work like closed exercises, worksheets, word searches, dictionary work, look, say, cover, write and check, using the Deutsch list, and in reading, language experience, paired reading, guided reading, all those activities that you normally do in your literacy classroom. In this case, it's done within an activity. There's a specific goal or specific area that you're looking at, and you do activities around that area. So coursework in this activity, specific to the activity, would be reading recipes, reading menus, reading food names for shopping lists. And you might do, for example, a closed exercise around writing a shopping list, the food names, product names. So some of the resources or materials you might use are online websites, and I'm going to look at one of those now, which allows you to do look, say, cover, write and check. And this site is the Ambleside look, say, cover and check website. You can Google Ambleside, Ambleside, and look, say, cover. That should bring you up to a link to this page here that we're looking at now. You can change the words that are displayed. So for this case, if we put in food, and we're talking about food preparation, we'll put in food and shop. You click on this go button, then you have this page. You look at the word, you know it, cover it, click in the box, check. Then you can move on to another one. The activities that we're looking at the moment are reading and writing. This is using a online website. So this could also potentially cover you for one of the learning outcomes for a computer module at level 2. So that was look, say, cover, write and check during the teaching and delivery stage. So you're doing coursework here. This is not work that will go into your assessment folder, but it will go into a coursework folder. So for all the work you do during the teaching and delivery stage, you can save it in a coursework folder. So you can also write on a piece of paper with a pen, look, say, cover, write and check. But what we looked at there was just an example of an online resource. So coursework covers any work that you do in the class with the student, and it's the same as the work that you would normally do if you were not doing a feedback assessment. So for the assessment part of this activity then, we have certain learning outcomes to meet, and they are in the area of writing. There are 4 learning outcomes. Learning outcome 1, the requirement is that the student write notes and messages needed for simple tasks. Learning outcome 2, write including drafting at least 5 sentences so that they can convey meaning or information. And you will have worked with your student on this during coursework. When it comes to the assessment stage, the student will be very familiar with what you're going to be assessing and have done it a number of times. Learning outcome 3, use the rules of writing appropriately. Example, spelling familiar words accurately, checking the spelling of less familiar words, and using capitals and full stops. Learning outcome 4, use a range of different forms of writing to suit purpose and audience. For example, instructions involving 3 steps or a short journal entry on an event or experience. In this case, one of the assessment activities which I devised for preparing a meal involves writing out the steps to how you would cook rice. And as I said, during the coursework stage, you would have done this with the student a number of times. Then you give that student the question to write out the steps to cooking rice. For each assessment activity, you don't go through and have an activity for learning outcome 1, then learning outcome 2. You can have an activity that covers a number of learning outcomes. For this workshop, I've done examples of a number of assessment briefs. An assessment brief is another word for the question, giving the student a question, and we'll have a look now at an assessment brief. In this case, I'm asking the student to write a shopping list based on the activity they're doing, which is preparing a meal. All assessment briefs should look the same. It should be consistent. Assessment brief number, program title, program that we have in Tipperary is Learning for Life, the certificate title, Certificate in General Learning, P2GLO, the level, the component, the assessment technique, which is collection of work, and this is the important bit here, the assessment guideline. This is where you set out the question that the student is going to do. So the assessment guideline here is you are cooking chicken curry for a friend. To do this, you first need to go shopping. You will need to write a shopping list. This list should contain at least 5 items. Make sure all spelling is correct. Write the list in the space provided below. Under assessment criteria, you show the learning outcomes that are covered by this task. So this task is in the area of writing, and it covers learning outcome 1, learning outcome 2, and learning outcome 4. So you give this to the student with a pen, they write out the shopping list. And again, during the coursework stage, you'll have written shopping lists with the student. Learning outcome 2, the requirement for learning outcome 2 is to write and instruct, including drafting at least 5 sentences so that they convey meaning or information. To cover that learning outcome, an invitation to the meal would cover that. So an invitation to a friend. So under the assessment guidelines, you're asked to write a note to your friend inviting him to a meal you are cooking. The invitation should include where the meal is on, what is being served, and the time to be there. Use correct punctuation and spelling. Write the invitation in the space provided below. What I've included here is you are also asked to read this invitation. The reading will be recorded, so we can use that as a reading task as well. So we can include up here then under component, we can include reading. So we are integrating assessment here. That's where we're integrating reading and writing, both those activities. Those are 2 briefs for writing at level 2. You could have one brief with a number of questions in it that covers all the learning outcomes. But you're not just including learning outcomes for writing, you're including reading as well. going to look at the reading module. Learning outcome 1. Read familiar words that are commonly used and personally relevant. For example, a list of items relating to a personal interest, sport or hobby. Learning outcome 2. Use simple rules and text conventions to support meaning. For example, punctuation, common abbreviations. Learning outcome 3. Interpret different forms of writing and text, including social signs and symbols. Example, common formats of bills, menus, forms, timetables, road and other signs, simple food preparation instructions, short piece of personal relevant writing. Learning outcome 4. Find key information from different forms of writing. For example, locating factual information in bills. And learning outcome 5. Use reading strategies, for example, clues, context, sound prediction, and decoding. So those are the learning outcomes for reading at level 2. There's 5 learning outcomes. So you set an assessment task which demonstrates that the student has met all of those requirements. For example, read instructions to make a chicken curry. So that's to We're going to look at the assessment brief now for cooking chicken curry. So again, it's a integrated assessment that includes reading and writing, both those components, so it's integrated. In this activity, you are asked to read the cooking instructions for chicken curry and then answer questions. You will write the answers into the space provided. Here we list the learning outcomes that are met by this task. Reading, learning outcome 1, reading, learning outcome 2, learning outcome 3, 4, and writing, learning outcome 3 and 4. The next page is the instructions that the student read, followed by the questions on those instructions. Question 1. How many garlic cloves do you need? Question 2. How many onions do you need? Question 3. Name the utensils needed. Question 4. Which ingredients should be finely chopped? So those are the questions based on what the students have read. So a comprehension question which they write in the answers, which is a writing task. So it's a reading and writing task which needs a number of learning outcomes. So therefore it's an integrated task. That's activity 1, preparing a meal, and there are some examples of the type of assessment activity that you would carry out based on that activity. The work that the student does for the assessment goes into an assessment folder, and you mark each assessment, you number each assessment, so it's clear for the external examiner what is what in the folder. The key point, I suppose, to remember here is that you're not assessing one SLO or one learning outcome after another. You're integrating assessment over a number of learning outcomes and over a number of components. In this example, reading and writing could also include, as we saw there with Look, Say, Cover, you can include an online computer activity which might cover you for a computer component if you're doing that as well. Obviously, this being preparing a meal, and there's shopping involved and there's measurement involved as well. You could also include a numeracy element to it, if you're doing a numeracy component. In this workshop is only concerned with reading and writing, therefore I have focused on those two components. That's it for activity 1, preparing a meal.